Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Earthly Headline. Today there's another article. More data has been released about a significant redating of the peopling of a certain continent, and this time it's Australia. And the headline reads, Aboriginal people lived in Australia's desert interior 50,000 years ago, earlier than first thought. So, people were living in the arid part of the desert of Australia 50,000 years ago. It's not close to the shoreline. It's definitely not close to the shoreline. So there's a lot of explaining that needs to be done here. And let's just go over the evidence really quick. First of all, the new dating sets it back 10,000 years earlier than previously known for the deserts. So just a little bit of background. A lot of people, there were a lot of legends, and this comes straight from the Aboriginal people themselves. They had lived there for a long time, and that they were a branch of human. That this is from the Aboriginal people, by the way. This is I haven't read up on the actual hard science behind it, but this is what has been maintained by the people themselves. Number one, they disputed the out of Africa theory, meaning that the Homo sapiens in Africa weren't the only humans that populated everybody today. So they're saying that they were a separate, unrelated branch, separate from the Africans. They believed, in their legend, they came from the Pleiadian star system. And that's why you see a lot of the New Age people, they always talk about the Pleiades and how they're either incarnations of spirits from the Pleiadian system. And the stories vary, but some of them say that they came here because they were escaping their old Earth, I guess, their old planet, either because their solar system was dying and they were evacuating, or other people say that they're here on a mission, of education, and they're kind of intergalactic, interstellar scientists doing this for more knowledge. There's all other people say that the Pleiadians are here to help guide us through and help us transcend through this reality. There's a lot of stories like that. One thing that is confirmed, to the best of my knowledge, is that it does hold up. Their genetics they have very little of the genetics of the people from Africa. So who knows how truthful their legends are and how distorted their message has gotten through, the people that I mentioned earlier, like the New Agey people and stuff like that. But anyway, with all that in mind, this becomes more interesting. So let's continue. So the research took place at the desert rock shelter site of Karnatakul, previously known as Serpent's Glen, around 800 kilometers southeast of Exmouth, which is more than 1,000 kilometers or 600 miles from where the coastline would have been at this earlier time. So at that, they even took into account where the coastline was back then, and it still was over 600 miles away. So these people were legitimately in a landlocked area, and they not only lived there, but they thrived there. It shows that people occupied the sandy deserts of interior Australia very soon after settling the north of the continent more than 50,000 years ago. So I guess that's the theory. The very northern part of the continent, the people came in through that way, which makes sense because at that time the water levels were lower. So all that, if you guys have ever heard of Sundaland, like where Indonesia and Southeast Asia, all that was one massive supercontinent, New Guinea, and it was connected to northern Australia as well. So that does make sense. So it would make sense that if people were coming from Sundaland, they would have to be coming from the north, because that's where the natural land bridge was at the time. The paper reports some of the earliest evidence of people living in deserts, not just in Australia, but anywhere in the world. Excavations old and new. Karnatakul was first investigated by archaeologists in the 90s. At that time, they dated it 25,000 years, and still at 25,000 years old, with the previous dating, it was still considered the oldest Western desert site. And then this excavation, they weren't even trying to redate it. What they were trying to do, they wanted to understand the occupational evidence. So they knew that people were there. They just wanted to see, like, get more details of what life was like living there. So they wanted to understand pigment art that was produced during the past 1,000 years, so very recent stuff. So they did find rich evidence for that, but they also unwittingly doubled the earliest known occupation dates for the site. So what they did was they got charcoal associated with the artifacts that was recovered in 2 squares dug beneath the site's main rock art panel. So there's this big rock, and then there's art. There's art painted all over the rock, but then they dug beneath it, 2 squares beneath it, and they both return similar sequences. Their radiocarbon dates, their determinations, which was hovering close to the technical dating barrier, which is 50,000 years. So that's like, if you don't know about radiocarbon dating, the barrier, so there's kind of like a cutoff where the isotopes no longer become super accurate, and that's about 50, give or take 50,000 years, give or take a few thousand years from there, and that's where they were hovering. So around that time, that's where the charcoal was dated to. So it could be older. It could be older technically. That just means that the charcoal's that old, but maybe human occupation there goes back even further. Which in the Aboriginal legends of these people, they do say that they came eons and eons ago. So maybe so far their story checks out, right? Based on this dating. More than 25,000 stone artifacts were recovered from the current excavations, along with pigments, charcoal from hearths, a small amount of animal remains, and other clues were discovered that gave a glimpse into the diet of the occupants. These remains, however, they're earlier than the oldest stuff found. They also found that they had technology. So they found a backed microlith, which is basically a tool with a sharp edge, basically. Almost like an axe, kind of. It was found in deposits dated to around 40,000 years ago. So 40,000 years ago, they were already pretty sophisticated tools, either used for hunting or processing wood or other material. This specific tool is 15,000 years older than other examples. So there's a pattern here, right? They have their previous evidence is kind of one ballpark date, and then they somehow tapped into a deeper, older part of Australia where there's like way older stuff, like almost like a different strata. So this goes back almost 2 precessional cycles. So if you don't know about precession of the equinoxes is basically the Earth is on a tilt, and because it's on a tilt, it rotates around the sun a certain way. So each rotation is about 25,920 years. This is almost 2 of those quote great years, these cycles. So this is insane. This is if you thought the Sphinx was old, this blows the Sphinx way out of the water. So other specimens have been recovered from the arid zone in South Australia, dated to around 24,000 years ago. So again, a different strata, a different pool of evidence that they've found, but still half the age of the oldest thing. And who knows, again, there might be something older out there. So microscopic analysis of residues and working edges on this tool reveal it was fastened by resin to a composite implement, like a wooden handle, and it broke in that half, presumably while being used. This photo is pretty cool. This is 5 millimeters, and this is what the backed artifact kind of looks like now. So there's like there's a blunt edge, and then there's a more jagged edge here, or working edge, and it's been in use because you can see how jagged it is. 43,000 years old, this thing. Amazing. So the reason why this is so impressive is because the scientists observed that the technological adaptations of backing and hafting, they're much earlier than they thought, previously demonstrated in Australia. So they had this knowledge even but twice as longer than they originally thought. So, man, a lot of stuff has to go out the window now. A lot of the preconceived notions of the Aboriginal people should just go out the door, because this is so significant, because it demonstrates that there was not only critical thinking, but they were organizing, they were cooperative, they were living in one of the harshest areas known to man and thriving. I mean, they had fires, they had all this culture, and it survived to this day. So, I mean, those Aboriginals, they knew what they were doing. They were produced in enormous quantities, these tools, across most of southern and eastern Australia in the recent past. So again, Australia is a huge place. It's a continent. It's huge. The fact that they occupied large swaths of desert is, again, just mind-blowing. And they got to have more credit than they're given. The specific site, Karnatakul, has more than 50 of this tool, dating to the last millennium, when the site was used as a home base. It's been argued previously that these specialized tools became more common as people responded to increased climatic volatility and less secure food sources. That makes sense. You would have to, there's less resources and you're living in a place that's highly populated, you're probably going to take up arms and defend your sack, so to speak. These current findings support the notion that the first Australians adapted with ingenuity and flexibility as they quickly dispersed into every bioregion across the country. So, yeah, that makes sense. They just like any other humans, they were smart, they were flexible, and they were resilient, and they dispersed after where they were occupying became less inhabitable, less hospitable. They just dispersed into better biodiverse regions. The evidence for the earliest ground edge axe used in the world comes from Kimberley. The very early presence of people in the interior deserts of Australia, as well as their very early use of a back microlith, changes how we understand the adaptive and technological sophistication of early Aboriginal peoples. Yeah, we just talked about that. The arid zone has often been characterized as an extreme environment occupied by transient dwellers. So yeah, they thought, up until now, they thought that they would find they'd find bodies here and there, but not enough to signal a large-scale civilization or a town or a tribe of people. They just found errant bodies here and there, and they didn't connect the dots. Even early European explorers died trying to traverse this desert. So this speaks volumes to how difficult it must have been to live there. And then, of course, there are cultural connections to the land. There's a mountain range known as Katjara, or the Carnarvon ranges of the Western Desert. So this area has a huge significance, and the people who were living there, like it had always been a culturally important place to them. So that the fact that it lives on in their culture, and that it was passed on either orally or through painted cave paintings or whatever, the Aboriginal people are still there, and they still speak about this sacred area. So that is very telling as well, because it was important enough for the people to pass it down through generations and generations, and 50,000 years plus of holding sacred this site. I mean, that's not nothing. That counts for something. Before we close this, I want to show you guys the shorelines of the Sundaland, and what it actually looked like and how it connected to Australia. So as you can see here, this is 14,500 years before present. So this isn't 50,000 years ago. I couldn't find an image for that. But you can see all the stuff in green now. This is what it looks like now, these islands. But the stuff in white is what's submerged now. And you can see how it's connected and how close this is. New Guinea and Northern Australia here. I mean, they found boats dating to this time as well, 60,000 years. So it's not that. It's just a hop, step, and it's just a hop, skip, and a step or whatever away from these islands to Australia. So I mean, it's not a big deal for them to, if they had boats already. It's not a stretch that they just took these boats and went to Australia. You know what I mean? I was incorrect earlier when I said that they walked across, unless they did. Because remember, this is a 14,500 before present map, so it might have been lower. Well, anyway, you guys get it. So let me know what you guys think about this. Is this BS? Do you guys know about the Pleiadians and the Aboriginal Australians and stuff like that? Let me know, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.